First of all, I want to express my appreciation to my dear friend Jamie for being a part of a group that invited me to be your speaker this evening here in Hollywood, where I was born and raised. I was doing a lot of thinking about an appropriate way to make a few remarks in accepting this award, and my mind wandered back to Washington, D.C., where we do a great deal of work. I'd like to share a story about Washington, D.C., and the outcome of this experience. A man sat at a metro station in Washington, D.C., and started to play the violin. It was a very cold January morning. He played 6 Bach pieces for about 45 minutes. During that time, since it was rush hour, it was calculated that literally thousands of people went through that station, most of them quickly on their way to work. 3 minutes went by, and a middle-aged man noticed that there was a musician playing. He slowed his pace, he stopped for a few seconds, but then he hurriedly went on. He had a schedule to keep. A minute later, the violinist received the last word of greeting from someone and his first tip, a $1 bill. A woman threw the money into the till and without stopping continued hurriedly on her way. A minute later, someone leaned against the wall and listened to him. But the man looked at his watch, started to walk again. Clearly, he was late for work, and off he went. The one who paid the most attention, however, was a 3-year-old little boy. His mother tagged him along, hurried, but the kid stopped to look and to listen at the violinist. Finally, the mother pushed hard, and the child continued to walk, turning his head all the time. This action was repeated over and over again by several other children. All the parents, without exception, forced them to move on. They were in a hurry to get somewhere. In the 45 minutes the musician played, only 6 people stopped and stayed for a violin, for just a moment to listen to his violin. About 20 minutes went by, and then about 20 people gave him some money as they passed by to put in the till. He collected a total of $32. When he finished playing and silence took over, no one even noticed it. No one applauded. No one was there. There was no any recognition. The evening came to a close. No one knew, however, that the violinist was the world-famous Joshua Bell, one of the best musicians on the face of the planet. He played one of the most intricate pieces ever written with a violin worth more than $4 million. 2 days before playing, he was in the subway. He was in Boston performing in a theater where the average ticket was nearly $300 per seat. Oh, this is a true story. Joshua Bell playing, hoping to be recognized in the metro station. And this was organized by the Washington Post as part of a social experiment about perception, taste, priorities, and focus. The outline was very simple. In a commonplace environment, in an inappropriate hour, do we ever perceive beauty? Do we ever step forward to try to think about what we ought to appreciate? Do we ever recognize the talent in an unexpected context? One of the conclusions from this study, this survey, if we do have a moment to stop and listen to one of the best musicians in the world and we fail to do it, playing probably the best music ever written, how many other precious things are we missing? How many other precious things are we missing? Well, I think 2 of the precious things that we miss very often. One, the qualities that make up the entrepreneur, and secondly, the qualities that make up volunteerism. The entrepreneur and volunteerism. And so really we're talking a little bit about that this evening as I get this award from you, about the entrepreneur and volunteerism, and the hope that these 2 precious items in our vocabulary will not disappear from that vocabulary. In the late 19 period, several years ago, around 1969, I had an opportunity to begin a firm because my former boss, a very well-known architect named Charles Luckman, believed in the entrepreneur. Now, you may not be familiar with the name Luckman, but he grew up as a very young man with almost no economic background, but he loved architecture. He studied architecture at the University of Illinois, and he was going to design some very significant buildings. He read an ad in the paper, because he was desperately looking for work, that Lever Brothers had an opening for someone in the graphics department, and so he applied. His attitude was, if I can design buildings, I can design graphics. And so the first assignment they gave him was to design a sales brochure. He worked on the brochure, and his critics looked at him and the company and said, too ambitious, too creative, it'll never work. And being a self-confident entrepreneur, Luckman said, and I can just hear those words knowing him so well, if I designed it, I know it will work. And Lever Brothers said, then you get out of the graphics department and you move to sales and you sales off your damn brochure. He took that challenge in his early 30s and he sold. At the age of 37, he became the president of Lever Brothers worldwide, making an awful lot of money in the decade of the 40s. At the age of 20, 30, 40 years, he gave it all up, came back to California, got his license, joined his classmate Bill Pereira, and created one of the world's largest architectural firms, including the design of Madison Square Garden. All during the period of building that firm, he never forgot the importance of volunteerism. And one of his high priorities was higher education. He became a trustee of the state colleges. He became chairman of our state college system, the largest system of higher education in the Western world. And the price he paid for that was, one, we could do no work with the state colleges because of conflict of interest, and two, he was chairman of the selection committee that picked all of his competitors to design buildings on the 24 campuses. He decided that a profession was also a business, and he told his staff, I'm looking for an internal PR director because we have to be managed and marketed like a business. I was fortunate to be recommended. He interviewed me. I had 4 fabulous years with Mr. Luckman. In 1969, in my late 20s, he was able to sell his company to a huge conglomerate called the Ogden Corporation. And he sat down with me. I was beginning a young family and said, young man, let me treat you like father and son. They want you to go to New York to be a part of their PR staff. Don't take it. Don't stay with me any longer. You will professionally stagnate. So I have decided what you should do with your career. I have decided you ought to get out of here and do for others what you've done for me. Start your own consulting firm. I also have decided that you will be successful, so I will never underwrite your firm and I will never be your client. But what I will do is give you 30 days with secretary to get out of here. Well, I thought, gosh, I wish he'd asked for my input on that decision. And so on May 1 of 1969, I started with secretary and myself and a hope and a prayer. The next year began the Carter years. We had 22% inflation. If you could get a loan at all, you paid with an arm and a leg. You took out a massive insurance policy to let the bank serve as a recipient. And the economy was so bad with the gas lines, we promised ourselves as Americans we would never let it happen again. And so my firm began. In those initial years, 2 things happened to me that I will never forget. May I share them with you? First, the first client we had was Norris Industries, an industrialist in Vernon. He was chairman of the board of USC's Board of Trustees. And the second client was Lou Wolf, who now owns the Oakland Athletics. That first client, Norris Industries, paid me $2,000 a month for a year to review all their political, civic, philanthropic, and charity requests and to recommend where they give their money. The second client, Lou Wolf, was then a developer and asked me to do some PR for him. If you add all of that up, it was $2,800 a month, all on a handshake. At the end of the first 4 months, Ken Norris Jr. in his 40s called me up and said, time for a chat. That was the first red flag. Then he started by lavishing praise upon what I had done for him. That's the second red flag, because it was followed by the huge pause that leads to a but or a however. I got them both. But he said, I have to spend more time with the company and with my father, and so we don't have time to continue the program. And so reluctantly, we're going to have to stop. and I saw $2,000 of $2,800 disappear. And let me tell you, it's very sad to see a grown man cry in the midst of another grown man. But I was seeing my company head into bankruptcy before we literally had gotten started. And then there was another pause. And Ken Norris Jr. said, however, we had a handshake. And that handshake was for a full year, and we've used up 4 months of it. That's $8,000. And we have 8 months to go. That's $16,000. That was our oral commitment. Here is my check for $16,000. I shiver as I think today. I said, Ken, I need the money, but I can't take it unless I work. He said, you're an entrepreneur. You can work. I'll call you. If only I call you when I really need your help, would you accept our agreement? And I said, yes, I needed it badly. In the 8 months that happened after that, he called 3 times. But I never forgot the fact that you could trust business, at least in most cases. And I never forgot what happened as a result of that. We launched the world-famous Norris Cancer Center at USC, which 9 years ago saved my life from cancer. And the second thing I will never forget are 8 wonderful entrepreneurs. One of them was slated to be the president of Chrysler Motors. They said, we'll be your board of directors. We will loan you $50,000. We'll stay on your board, guide your company, and we'll stay as long as we feel we're doing something for you, and then we'll turn it over to you. At the end of 5 years, the 8 came to me and said, you don't need us anymore. Let's go across the street to the Bank of America and get a loan, and you can repay us. The company's all yours. And so we marched across the street, and we had a long discussion with the bank manager whom I knew, and I said, now I'm ready to get my $50,000 as a loan so I can repay the gentleman. And the branch manager, with a smile and a glee on his face, said, oh, I'm afraid it's not $50,000. It's $50,000 times 5 years of interest at over 22% per year. That's an awful lot of money, young man. Don't believe you probably will ever be able to repay it in any limited amount of time. And as I was about to cry again in public, the chair of our board said, no, wait a minute, Mr. Banker. We only want our original $50,000. We don't want the interest. That is our evidence of confidence and faith in this young man, just the $50,000. And as I think back over those 2 experiences at the beginning of our firm, I wondered what might have happened to me had we not had people like that who believed in what this was all about. So we're talking about the entrepreneurial spirit and about the feeling of volunteerism. You know, when it comes to the volunteerism, I think of the many entrepreneurs who have become millionaires, if not billionaires, and we read about them and we need them and their generosity. And people often wonder why they want to give all their money. Sometimes it's because they want the good feeling that comes from helping others. Sometimes they want to become celebrities in the process. Sometimes they want media attention they wouldn't get anywhere else. Sometimes they want to set a good example for others to follow. Sometimes they want their name on a building of a university or a hospital. Sometimes they believe if they do it correctly, they'll one day be a guest at one of the Kardashian TV weddings. Sometimes they believe that maybe it's a business opportunity. But we have those entrepreneurs who have money who give. But what I'm really interested in are the people who don't have quite that much money, who are below the radar screen, who you know and I know, and many of them may be sitting in my audience right now, without the fanfare, the media attention, the awards, the publicity, the visits to the White House, but think of what they're doing. I'm thinking about the hospital volunteer, the person who went to New Orleans to help rebuild New Orleans as a result of Katrina, the people who serve the hungry and the homeless, the people who raise money for scholarships for our youth, the people who sit on boards of chambers of commerce, the people who walk and run and ride for cancer, the people who man the telephone suicide lines every day, the people who serve as Cub Scout leaders, who read to the elderly, who rescue animals on the street, who spend time with our veterans, who come in LA to show this city to our foreign visitors. How about the people who help the abused, who comfort the sick and the depressed, who are camp counselors, who join the Optimists or the Kiwanis or the Rotary, who are an example of working in the neighborhoods with rummage sales to support their churches and their synagogues, the people who sell Girl Scout cookies with their little girls, the people who coach soccer on Saturdays, the people who read in our church and our temples during the religious periods, the people who provide a prison ministry, the people who try to rehabilitate our youth gangs. And these people do all of this, some of them right here in this audience, before you reach the top. As you were building your careers, you were learning to give back. I remember the days when people gave back after they had their life in order, their money well established, their investments working, and they were much older. Today, younger people are getting involved as volunteers. They're starting in the elementary school levels by their parents who are young and who are building their businesses as entrepreneurs, who believe that with the entrepreneur spirit also comes philanthropy. Oh, I think if I had not been your speaker today to Jamie, I might have suggested some of my friends who would have done, well, a far better job up here than I. I'd like to meet the CFO of a company who came to our networking and talked about what it means to be CFO of an investment banking company. That's the front side of his card. He flipped over to the back side of the card and said, "My hobby, I'm a scuba diver, and I'm concerned about veterans. And so what I do at the VA hospital, I take the veterans and I take them out to the port of Long Beach and the port of LA, and I teach them scuba diving, and I get in the water with them because that water can be tranquil and peaceful and cool for people who are patients in a VA hospital. I do it faithfully every weekend." Oh, let me add, the veterans in my program have neither arms nor legs. They are quadriplegic as a result of Afghanistan and Iraq. And because we have no limbs, I communicate with them in the water through our eyes. When they're in trouble, the eyes tell me that. When they are tranquil, my eyes tell me that as well. So I help those without limbs who are the result of bombings and other major war efforts in the Middle East. Or if I could not have been your speaker, I would love to have you meet Joe, who had a Uniglobe a firm in the marina. He came to our networking and he said, "I love ski sports," and I put ski packages together, and I began to have headaches. And the doctors kept telling me to take a few aspirins, drink some water, lie down, and everything will be fine. Until a doctor really looked in my eyes, and as a result of that said, "No, it's a massive tumor." I had the surgery and I recovered, but it massively fell upon my optic nerves. And so I can barely see the E on the E chart on the wall. But I'm still proud to be alive today because I still have some degree of sight. And what I have learned was appreciation for the winter sports and something called the Foundation for the Junior Blind. And every weekend I go to the young people and I counsel them on how important it is, even with limited eyesight, to still believe that life is worth living. Or Howard could have been your speaker today, who every weekend went to see Sam, an 85-year-old Jewish gentleman whose family had gotten rid of him. And so he counseled with Sam. He played cards with him and chess with him. And he stayed with Sam as his friend until Sam passed away. Or Lisa, who got a young lady, 95 young, who was Russian and Jewish, and every weekend she spent time with her. And she said to the doctors, "I want to be with this woman. If we find out it's the final hours, wherever I am, call me." The doctors reached her somewhere in the world. She managed to get back to bedside, had the young lady at age 95 in her arms, who passed away with Lisa. But Lisa was able to comfort her and help her as a volunteer before she passed. I think of Carlos, the manager of one of our very prominent hotels here in town, who created a $100,000 a year scholarship program in his hotel to give to the children of employees of that hotel and to watch them grow in the very jobs they had. I think of the bank executive who came out of Nigeria. The people in his little village raised enough money to send him to college in this country. And so every year he goes back to Nigeria for 3 weeks and he digs fresh water wells so that they will have something to drink. You never read or hear about him. I think of my friends who went down to Haiti with their church groups and to build the homes as a result of the earthquakes and the tornadoes and the hurricanes that have hit the area. I think of the people who come out of a small area of Palos Verdes who said, "You know, if children who are terminally ill can laugh, that it may help the healing process. And so the ladies got together and they created Mad Hatter hats. And women in prison crocheted those Mad Hatter hats. And today in over 70 hospitals all over the country, those children and the doctors and nurses who serve them laugh. And that helps in the healing process. I think of a Jewish woman who joins people from her temple and several years ago during the high holidays goes to women's prisons and provides the religious services for them during those high holidays. What I'm suggesting as I close this evening is that the purpose in life is much more than a TV reality show. What we need to strengthen and survive America is a feeling of focus and purpose built on that wonderful blend, as the chemists must do, of the entrepreneurial spirit and the spirit of philanthropy. We mourn the loss of Stephen Jobs. Job spent a lot of money and 7 years of his life all over the world trying to find a healing for his cancer. How many of us struggle regularly to find a reason to keep going, a focus, a purpose, a missionary feeling, because most of us really don't want to die till the time is right. We want to do something with our lives. This evening I came from my home and came up Highland to come over here past Sunset and Hollywood Boulevard to the hotel. And I passed my high school where I was a student many years ago called Hollywood High School. And if I had continued on this Highland a little bit further, we would have gone to the Hollywood Bowl where I was a valedictorian speaker when our high school graduated. And as I spoke to those students in that massive 18,000 seat Hollywood Bowl, we only had 2,000 filled, but I pretended all 18,000 were filled. There was in front of the podium the motto of Hollywood High: achieve the honorable. Achieve the honorable. As an entrepreneur who must believe in philanthropy, we must achieve the honorable. I was reminded of that choice of the honorable several years ago when I got on a plane in St. Louis heading for Dayton, Ohio. As we looked out of the DC-9 on TWA, if you're old enough to remember TWA, we looked out the window and saw a large black funnel cloud. And it was heading toward the Dayton area. And the pilot said on the loudspeaker, "We're going to try to get there as quickly as we can. We think a tornado is going to hit the area." And so we landed just in time, and I was guest of the mayor. His car was there. He put me in the official car. We went to the hotel. That evening I gave a speech, and all night long the hotel rattled. And I, as a Southern Californian, had not been used to the tornado. The next morning when I got up, we saw the results. Just outside of Dayton was a community called Xenia, and the tornado had hit Xenia and killed nearly 36 people. I was given a tour of Xenia before I left the area. There on that main street was what mankind is all about. At one end of that main street, the National Guard and the police and the Highway Patrol and armed forces were protecting stores from looters who were running in there to grab everything they could from people who were the victims of the tornado. But at the other end of that same main street were lines of people seemingly a mile long with the Red Cross donating blood, getting a glass of orange juice and a donut, and donating their blood to help those who have been victimized and ravaged and injured by the tornado. And I thought to myself, on that same one street, we have the choice of life. From those at one end who are taking advantage of human mistake and error and tragedy, and those at the other end who are trying to help people live and make it what it really is all about. And so that's what a conference like this is all about. And as I close this evening, I think that perhaps if we do our job, and if we combine that spirit of the entrepreneur with the spirit of philanthropy, then we'll have an answer when we look in the mirror and it goes, "Is anybody happier because you passed this way? Does anyone remember that you spoke to them today? The day is almost over and its toiling time is through. Is there anyone to utter now a kindly word of you? Can you say tonight in parting with the day that's slipping fast that you helped a single person of the many that you passed? Is a single heart rejoicing over what you did or said Does the one whose hopes were fading now with courage look ahead? Do you waste the day or do you use it? Was it well or sorely spent? Did you leave a trail of kindness or a seed of discontent? As you close your eyes this evening in slumber, do you think that God will say, "You have earned one more tomorrow by what you did today"? Thank you for allowing me to be with you this evening.
Thank you very much.